Becalmed, the Perfuga drifted, not through stars nor space, but through a silence far worse. The void here was empty. No gas, rocks, hardly any dust. The nearest stay by dead reckoning was 4 light-years away. No stars lit the hull. Only distant auroras of half-dead starlight shimmered like drowning torches. The ship was a wreck. Its forward hull had been flayed open, now a blackened crescent where the macro batteries once sat. Steel girders jutted like snapped bones. The brute force engines, makeshift and bolted from 5 other vessels, were simply gone, ripped from the spine housing mid-translation. Only loose conduit cables and cooling vanes remained, dangling like entrails into the dark. Cargo pods had ruptured or imploded, strewn along the flanks in a debris cloud of broken containers, corpses, and slagged machinery. One entire crew quarter section, compartment 14 Delta, had torn loose during re-entry, now trailing behind the vessel like a tumor of wreckage, connected by frayed gantries and leaking gas lines. The Gellar field core flickered, maintaining only minimal containment, its protective light fading in unreliable pulses. What little life support remained came from jury-rigged subcircuits and the last battery cells rerouted by Moyle before he collapsed. Inside, the corridors were freezing. Walls were lined in frost. Pipes wept water vapor. Deck plating creaked with every motion, as if the ship itself were breathing in pain. The Perfuga wasn't dead, but it wasn't alive either. It was adrift in nothingness, a haunted thing becalmed in the deep unreality between moments, waiting to be claimed by something worse than death. The bridge of the Perfuga was half lit, half dead. A few functioning lumens cast long shadows over the consoles and cogitators, their displays flickering intermittently. Steam drifted from cracked vents. The sound of pressure equalizing pulsed faintly through the walls. Ingusor sat in the corner, wrapped in an emergency foil blanket, hands curled around a steaming tin of thick broth. He didn't speak. He hadn't since they pulled him out of the sphere. His third eye was sealed beneath a scrap of black cloth. His breath rattled faintly, like something still catching up to his body. The navigator had not returned to his throne. He couldn't. It was a pile of rotting mushrooms. Sorny sat at the helm, her coat torn, one sleeve stitched crudely with surgical staples. She flicked through command menus, feeding life into the ship's dying nerves. "Life support limited to 12 compartments," she said. "Heating in 6, oxygen in 10, grav plating back online. But no redundancy. Lose a circuit and it's 0G again." Moyle stood behind her, arms crossed. His face was soot-streaked, knuckles bloodied from where he'd pulled apart the power lines barehanded. But he stood straighter than usual. "No beacon?" he asked. She shook her head. "No Vox link, no proximity nets, no buoy trails. We're light years off any patrol lanes. By the time anyone gets it, we're all dust and ice." She leaned back, rubbing her temples with thumb and forefinger. The bridge creaked around them. One of the pick displays let out a pop, and a gout of static fuzzed into the air. Moyle shifted, unsure of what to do with his hands. Sorny looked at him. Her expression didn't change, still that hard, flinty weariness, but her voice softened by a degree, just a degree. "You fixed the warp engines," she said. "You saved us." Moyle blinked. He started to say something, stopped, then nodded. "I just followed the conduit maps." Sorny exhaled slowly. "Most crew wouldn't have made it 2 meters into the never space. You came through and still have one head." She held out a metal flask. Moyle hesitated, then took it. The contents were bitter and warm, probably from her private stock. She looked back to the helm. "My people call those who walk in the never space nightmare traveler." Moyle nodded. "What is that in your tongue?" She smiled. "In Uralkan, it would be Thurukan Davel, or just Thurukan if you are in a hurry." He raised his eyebrows. "That's a mouthful." He looked at her talismans and animal fur that adorned her armor. "Are all Uralkan warriors?" She actually laughed, the first time he had ever seen her do so. "Uralkan are the people of Karvansari. There are many tribes. The tribes who live in the Shathul do not go in for fighting much. They are workers of metal and crop growers." She leaned forwards, switching a blinking lumen off, and tapped a few keys. The ship gave a slight shudder as ore filtration systems kicked in. She sat back. "My tribe is the Thulathi. We do not live in the Shathul. We rove the land, hunt for game, trade pelts and meat with the other tribes for grain and tools." Moyle thought about that, On the hive where he grew up, it was much the same, but without the snow. What is a shathul? It was bugging him. Sorny hesitated slightly, perhaps trying to think of a way of explaining it. Shathul means ancestor husk, the hulls of spacecraft that crashed into the bedrock. They are under miles of ice, warm, safe from hunters. Moyle was impressed. He sat down at the console that managed heat exchanging. He may as well be useful while he was here. The relic unlooked for. The forward hull of the Perfuga was a shattered void chamber, once home to a macro cannon battery. Now it opened directly into the stars. Baelgor stood beside Naman Sul at the edge of a warped observation gantry, exposed to the black. Their mag boots clicked faintly against twisted decking, the only sound save the hum of the low-power life support that still bled warmth into a few sparse compartments. He raised a gloved hand and pointed into the void. That line, those red points, that's the Rust Belt. Old trade clusters, dead now, half of them, Baelgor said. And farther out, those dim ones, see them? Those are the first of the null stars. Pale as death, give no warmth. That's why they're called that. He gestured again, slower this time, to a brighter star that flickered with cold light. KX Pale 208, closest system, still light years out. Too far to matter. Naman Sul nodded once, expression hidden behind a cracked faceplate. His Vox sputtered as he tested the signal again. Still nothing, he growled. Vox lanes are dead. We're outside every known path, not even on the old Mechanicus fallback grids. No beacons, no relays, no one's coming. Baelgor didn't respond right away. He let the silence sit like dust in his lungs. Then, at least the gene seed's intact, shielded core compartments held through translation. Whatever else we lost, we still have them. Naman turned. And the coffins? Cold, still locked, no breach alarms. The apothecarian vaults are sealed tight, Baelgor confirmed, then paused. It's a miracle we didn't lose the whole cargo, or maybe a curse we didn't. They both looked forward into the wrecked chamber. Jutting through the starboard wall, lodged at a grotesque angle between shattered plating and melted gantry work, was something vast and wrong. Baelgor had seen it before, though he could not explain how it had come to be here. He stepped closer, one arm raised to shine a lumen over the surface. It's Mirianthar, he said quietly. Naman looked over. The Daemon siege cannon lost on NihtWyrtha? Baelgor nodded slowly. It fell into a vortex according to reports. Valcaron told me about it. Said it was drawn in. The warp took it. We assumed it was gone forever. Not gone, Naman said flatly. Just waiting. The cannon was fused into the hull, half melted, half phased, as if reality had tried to forget it and failed. Its edges shimmered with static bleed and null friction, a thing too advanced for the present age to fully understand. Even the Mechanicus would struggle to reawaken such a relic. Baelgor stepped around it, carefully avoiding protruding, fractured coils. It's null now, cold, doesn't even register on auspex. A ghost weapon. Even if we could fix it, which we can't, we'd never have the power. The Perfuga's heart couldn't feed a tenth of what this thing needs. It's dead, Naman said. Baelgor looked again at the black barrel of Mirianthar, lodged like a rusted spear into the corpse of their ship. Maybe, he said, not sounding sure. They stood at the lip of the Perfuga's broken prow, boots mag-locked to the warped plating where the macro battery had once jutted like a fang. Beyond them, the stars stretched across the void in hollow silence. No beacon lights. No traffic, no motion, just emptiness. Not the ordered silence of space, but the haunting stillness of being forgotten. Baelgor rested one hand on a scorched strut and stared out at the distant smudge of KX Pale 208. We have no engines, he said flatly. Naman Sul nodded. Translation impossible. Even if we could coax enough power to ignite the warp drives. He glanced sideways, optics humming. Ingusor can't navigate without a sphere, and the navigator's chamber. I know, Baelgor cut in, rubbing his gauntlet over his scalp. The mushrooms are gone, but the titanium hull, it's turned to something like parchment, crumbles when you touch it. Naman made a quiet clicking noise, equal parts bemused and reverent. A fitting metaphor, he murmured, a shrine sealed in a book of skin. One day, a ship might find us, drift across this path and see what remains. A shell, a whisper. A ghost ship. Baelgor stared at the red band of rust belt stars. They blinked slowly like dying embers. We should carve our names in the hull, he said, so someone knows we were here. Or maybe just leave a note, pinned to our armor. One previous user somewhere needs a good home. Naaman exhaled through his rebreather, the sound dry and humorless. They'll find a corpse and a relic and wonder which was which. Baelgor didn't answer at first. Then he turned to Naaman, eyes reflecting the faint warp light on the horizon. You ever think we'll find out who won? The heresy? Naaman asked. Baelgor nodded. The tech priest looked away, out into the dark. We'll never know. Not really. Not from here. Baelgor chuckled, a bitter sound. It's been 5,000 years. I doubt we'd have made it to the end even if we'd picked the right side. Probably take another 5,000 more, and even then, he trailed off. They both stood there, motionless on the wrecked hull, two survivors of a failed dream looking into the void that had swallowed the galaxy. Lower deck bunks. Dagvar stepped through the creaking hatch, shoulders hunched against the cold. The bunk room was dark, the overhead lumen sputtering. No heating this far aft. Frost laced the walls like a parasite. A thin sheen of ice crept along the floor grills. Astellan sat on the edge of a bunk, his cloak recently stitched with thread that barely matched. A gloved hand moved in practice strokes, working a rag over the length of his blade. The steel gleamed faintly in the low light, the edge clean, almost reverent. His breath rose in white clouds. Dagvar nodded toward him. That's the last of them in cryo. All the pods we've got are full. Astellan didn't look up. He inspected the edge of his weapon and replied quietly. They're coffins, really, just slower ones. He set the blade down and finally glanced at Dagvar. Why the cryo for the crew but not the command? On Grimness, the Archmagos and High Adepts would be sealed in cryo the moment oxygen rationing began. The crew was just expected to run out of air. Dagvar leaned against the cold bulkhead, arms crossed. This isn't a Grimness ship. Praetor Kedon and the others, they're not that kind of people. He shrugged. Besides, 3 of them are Astartes. Sorny says they can do that deep sleep meditation thing. They'll probably outlast the rest of us anyway. He looked at Astellan's blade again, noticing the faint, dark residue still near the hilt. You took out Markham and most of the infected. I think your talents will be greatly appreciated by the warband. Astellan smiled, a small, lopsided expression, the kind that didn't reach the eyes. He said nothing, only offered Dagvar the flask. They shared it in silence, passing the bottle back and forth as the room slowly froze around them. Their breath fogged the viewport, and outside the stars spun slowly in the dead sky. Astellan looked down at his blade again, then said under his breath, barely audible, "Still the slasher of Trinova." Dagvar said nothing. They drank until their fingers went numb and the cold bit into their bones. Not speaking, just breathing the silence together. 2 survivors finding company in frost and steel. Ghosts of old friends. The sickbay was dark, lit only by the guttering lumens half swallowed in frost. Kedon carefully eased Valkaron from the Medicae cot, the old word-bearer's weight resting heavily against him. His armor was fractured, servos hissing weakly, power pack venting steam through burned-through seams. The sorcerer's left vambrace was shattered, the shoulder plate hanging by wiring and prayer-laced cabling. Together they limped slowly to the observation chamber, or what remained of it. The viewports were cracked but held pressure, rimmed with frost. Ice flowered across the glass like memories trying to cling to the void. A few lumens still functioned, though most flickered weakly, casting the room in a failing yellow pallor. Kedon settled Valkaron into a seat. The preacher leaned back with a low exhale, breathing like a furnace cooling. "I didn't think I'd see the stars again," Valkaron murmured, eyes half-lidded as he stared through the frost-webbed pane. Kedon let out a tired breath of his own. "You and me both." He stepped to the viewport, eyes scanning the pale stars. The same stars he'd seen all his life, now colder, more distant. It was him, I'm sure of it. Valkaron tilted his head slightly, watching Kedon without speaking. "For all you know," the sorcerer finally said, "you were hallucinating. We were in the immaterium. That realm is shaped by the mind's eye, a literal nightmare." Kedon shook his head. "No, I know his voice. He spoke to me. I swear on my blade." Valkaron favored his broken arm, fingers brushing cracked seals. A warp echo then, a ghost of will made manifest. He looked back out the window, into nothing. Still, if he had enough faith, enough hate, enough raw, seething intent, perhaps part of him did survive, maybe, He paused, voice soft. Maybe he moved forward through the warp from that one moment of dying rage to the moment you needed him the most. He smiled faintly. Call it a guardian daemon. They both laughed, the sound thin in the half-frozen chamber. Then, quietly, Kadon reached up and pulled the straps from his shoulder. The Vox harness creaked as he unclipped it. The pack itself had been gone for years, but he had worn the frame out of habit, out of guilt. A relic from Terra, from failure. The metal rig clanged against the floor. It echoed, low, final. Kadon straightened. He felt lighter, not just in body, but in something deeper, something older. He stared into the void. Not that it matters. The Perfuga is sinking. You can only patch so many hull breaches and lash so much rigging. Sooner or later the ship settles. The tide pulls it under. Valkan grinned. Your problem, Kadon, is that you lack faith. They sat in silence, two veterans lost in pale starlight, and then a flash in the black. Beyond the drifting wreck, something emerged. Reality split with a thunderclap of energy, and a single, angular form translated into existence. The Karabath Zarlite. Halatrax had found them. Later, he would tell the story, how a man in relic black armor had appeared aboard the Hollow Crown, wearing the emblem of the 10th Legion. He had approached a terrified cultist and given him a list of coordinates. No one had believed him, but the numbers had brought them here, to the Perfuga. On the ruined bridge, as the transmission crackled to life, Valkaron gave Kadon a long, knowing look. Kadon said nothing. He only stared back out at the void, hiding the faintest ghost of a smile. He had lacked faith, past tense.